Hello, America and the world. Welcome to another episode of The Brain Trust, starring Dr. Duke, that's me, and Alex Newman,
that's me,
the star of the Newman Report. And we're here to answer your questions, so let's get right down to it. The first question today is from Alton in Dallas, Texas. What would your ideal candidate for president be like?
I guess I would start by saying I'd like my ideal candidate for president to take his oath to the Constitution seriously. So when they put their hand on the Bible and say they're going to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, I'd like them to take that seriously. And that means you follow the Constitution on every issue. Even if you think a particular goal is noble, if it uses a means that violates the Constitution, it needs to be rejected. And in this case, the president has the authority to veto. And so I would love a president who would veto almost everything, unless it were legislation undoing previous unconstitutional legislation. I would love a president who would drastically slash the budget. And I would love a president who would educate the American people, use his bully pulpit to expose the enemies of the United States, the deep state, the people who want to take our freedom and take down our country, and also to educate the American people about our history as a people, about America has the most incredible history of any nation that I can think of, with the possible exception of ancient Israel. And yet your average American today has no clue. The schools aren't teaching it. So I would love to have a president who would say, hey, everybody, we're having a fireside chat. This is what you need to know about American history. So that would be my ideal candidate. Doesn't have to be tall, small, it doesn't matter. Just obey your oath of office and teach the American people something.
I'd vote for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I also would say I want a president who is not a celebrity and a narcissist. I don't want any more Barack Obamas. I don't want the presidency to be a de facto kingship. It's a small house. The American president doesn't live in a palace, doesn't live in a mansion. He doesn't really live in some great sprawling palace of Versailles. He is not the monarch. He is not anymore. In fact, he's not even. He works for us. We employ him. He is not some overlord with us. and I mean, even to a certain degree, it bothers me a little bit about Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is at least an outsider. But his personality, right, is so out supersized in some ways. Give me just somebody who's competent. I don't want flashy. I don't want somebody whose wife's going to be on the Vogue covers all the time. I want somebody who's going to do what the American president should do, to manage in a competent way, as Alex said, following strictly the Constitution as his guide, is going to just manage the country. When did we get to the point where whenever the president comes to your town, there's a 50-car entourage coming and going? What is that all about? Flying from Air Force One to Marine One in a helicopter to get any place you're going. It's overdone. We've created in what is a constitutional republic where government works for us. We are the bosses of them. They aren't the bosses of us. When did we become so almost British-like in our preening with these highly elected officials? They're oftentimes remarkably unspectacular people. I mean, what was Barack Obama before he became president of the United States? Pot smoking dropout, community organizer, rabble rouser, spent 3 or 4 months in the U.S. Senate, and all of a sudden now that mom-wearing jeans fraud is intrinsically interesting? No, I don't think so. And same thing about Donald Trump. I mean, I'm glad he's the president, certainly over Hillary Clinton, but I mean, I look at his life as he was a builder. He was more interesting to me, Donald Trump, when he was creating things, building things. Now, put the Twitter down. The Apprentice, I think, marked a transition for Donald Trump. I don't want any more presidents like that. I want a president that's completely competent and completely forgettable. From Carla in Carbondale, Illinois. Who are the bigger hypocrites? Oh, this looks interesting. Who are the bigger hypocrites? #MeToo, #Black Lives Matter, BLM, or Antifa. I'll start this one. #MeToo. Now, they're colossal hypocrites. I'll give you an example. They killed their own movement. #MeToo killed their own movement. Notice how no one's talking about it anymore? Because what happened? They went all in against Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh was the end of the world. Some dopey college professor with a really squeaky voice decided that 30 years ago, maybe it was Kavanaugh who raped her at a party with no other evidence, no other corroborating support, and #MeToo was born. And that was a big deal. And even if he didn't do it, just the suspicion, all women should be believed. And that lasted until Joe Biden became the Democrat nominee. Joe Biden, who we have on film groping women. Joe Biden was much more credibly accused of rape by Tara Reade much more recently, and much more specific she was than any of those clowns that accused Trump. And what did the hashtag MeTooers do? All of a sudden, they forgot what hashtag MeToo. So they're huge hypocrites. But go back to the list for a second. Black Lives Matter, I don't call them hypocrites because they're ignorant Marxists. So you could call them ignorant, you can call them Marxist, you could call them venal, you could call them all politics and no philosophy, but at least they don't pretend to be anything more than that. So what you see with Black Lives Matter is what you get, right? A completely vapid Marxist organization that just got lucky at the timing when they became big. So I'm not going to count them. That leaves us with, for me at least, the last one. Hashtag Antifa. Again, you label yourself anti-fascist, and then your every move and strategy is to engage in fascist behavior. You are going to fight fascism by silencing your enemies. You're going to fight fascism by burning down buildings. You're going to fight fascism by becoming intolerant, libtard fascist yourself. And you're too stupid to see it. And every time somebody says to me, Dr. Pesta, Antifa can't be fascist because their name says Antifa. That's literally the argument I get from Antifa. That's the level of discourse you get from supporters of Antifa. They can't be fascists because they call themselves Antifa. To me, Antifa takes the day.
Well, I'd like to throw Black Lives Matter back into the nominating ring because, they claim to care about black lives. And I reject the entire premise, the whole idea of, different races. I believe we're all one blood. We all come from Adam and Eve. But if we start from their premise, this idea that Black Lives Matter, and I agree, people who have any skin tone, their life matters because they're made in the image of God. And then you have a thing called Planned Parenthood, founded by a lady who wanted to exterminate people she considered to be human weeds, primarily ethnic minorities, people who weren't as smart as she thought
Black
they ought
and brown
to be.
skins.
That's right. And, they started the Negro Project. They went out, that's what she called it. They went out to recruit dark-skinned ministers to try to convince black people that they should jump on this bandwagon. And Black Lives Matter has said not a peep. And yet Planned Parenthood murders more black people in half an hour than all of the police in this entire country murdered unarmed black men all of 2019. So if they really cared about black lives, fine. Let's have a conversation about Planned Parenthood. Let's have a conversation about David Dorn, the black former police officer who was murdered during a Black Lives Matter riot. Why are there no protests protesting the people who killed him? Why is nobody talking about it on the media? So I think Black Lives Matter deserves serious consideration as the biggest hypocrites. But you're right, it's tough competition there when you bring in the Me Too and the Antifa.
I'll throw more bone your way because not just David, Mr. Dorn, but you also got the fact that blacks killing blacks in cities like Chicago. Chicago is a completely Democrat-owned city for like the last 100 years. There are no Republicans anywhere. It's all on the Democrats. Now you have an African-American female mayor. Under her watch, blacks killing blacks is through the roof. You mentioned Planned Parenthood kills more in 1 hour than all the cops kill African-Americans unarmed. How many blacks killing blacks do you have versus white cops killing black people across the country? In Chicago alone, how come there hasn't been a single protest against black death in Chicago, which dwarfs what the cops have done? You take all the people cops kill every year for a variety of reasons, and you look at what happens in that one little city of Chicago, it's staggering what the ratio is. So where's the outrage for black people who are killed by other black people? See, that doesn't fit the narrative. So I'm with you. I mean, that's another good way of looking at it. Let's just say that there's plenty of hypocrisy to go around.
Yeah,
How about that?
There is, yeah.
All right, our final question of the day comes from Michelle in Orlando, Florida. And Michelle, we have not seen this question before, and she asks, what shows or movies can you recommend during all this COVID lockdown nonsense?
That's a really tough one for me to answer because I grew up outside of the United States without American TV. So I watched Supercampeones, which was a Japanese cartoon that they translated into Spanish a little bit in Mexico, but we really didn't have much TV. But one thing that I've discovered now, being back in America, my family and I have started watching Little House on the Prairie, and that is a phenomenal show. Everybody in my family loves it. It's like the highlight of our week when we go watch Little House on the Prairie. So I would recommend that, and also I would recommend, and again, maybe I'm just being old-fashioned here, but pick up a book too. Books are fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's much more classy about that than I am. I mentioned in the last one of these shows we did, The Brain Trust, that I grew up too much on sports. I also grew up a latchkey kid who grew up watching TV to amuse myself. So I keep my hand in the TV game. And I tell you, I won't watch. I try to scrupulously avoid anything that the mainstream media likes. So if movies, I have never seen E.T. I have never seen Titanic. You can go down. What's the stupid movie? Avatar. You can go down all the most high-selling movies of the last 20 years. I've consciously not seen any of them. I have lately been watching screwball British comedy on BritBox. The British have a really warped sense of humor.
Oh, they do.
Very dry, very wry, and oftentimes actually relatively apolitical. British comedians will say the worst things, and it's funny to watch. So for me, anything that's not mainstream, anything that's not trying to push a political agenda, I will double down with what Alex said. There were some really great TV shows in the 70s. Right? You had some really great wholesome shows. You had some really great sitcoms, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Bob Newhart. These were shows that knew how to be funny without being vulgar or crass. They were family-oriented. They were genuinely funny in the same way that Little House on the Prairie was genuinely simple and profound about life in a simpler age. So going back in time and looking at some of those classic TV shows probably going to take you a lot farther than watching some of the new ones now.
Yeah, absolutely. I am just horrified when I see things on TV now, and I never do it deliberately, but sometimes I'll be in a hotel or something, TV turns on. It's almost revolting. There is one subscription service that we subscribe to now. It's called PureFlix, and they've got a lot of wholesome pro-family content. Some of it's explicitly Christian. Some of it's just not offensive in the way that what comes through the television nowadays is. But I don't have cable. I don't want cable. I haven't had cable since I've lived in America or overseas. And I recommend that people really seriously consider opening up some books. And there are some good documentaries too. I'll throw that out there. I got a big part of my education early on while I was in college from watching documentaries. And now YouTube's trying to erase them all, throw them all down the memory hole. But there is some good stuff out there, but books, I think, are where it's at. Yeah, books are great. And I would second the documentaries. Stay away from the Michael Moore. Oh, goodness. That might as well. Michael Moore's work really ought to qualify as mockumentary, right? It's like right up there with Spinal Tap and its unbelievability. But there are smart people doing serious work in documentary, exposing a lot of bad stuff and highlighting a lot of good stuff. So educational TV in that regard is pretty good as well. And most documentaries aren't preachy. If the documentarians are honest reporters, right, it's not preachy. They're not driving to a particular political point. They're more interested in exposing a particular problem. But Alex is right. I'd like to be stronger myself and just unplug. There's something very satisfying about the idea of just unplugging, just tuning out for a while. The phones every day are enough, walking around with them, right? So, but anyway, and you've got kids, so do your kids watch any TV other than what you guys watch together? Occasionally we let them watch the really old cartoons, Heckle and Jekyll, Tom and Jerry, stuff like that, but nothing beyond that. The stuff with anvils falling on people? Yes, it's actually hilarious. I get a kick out of it. Roadrunner, oh my goodness. What would the progressives say about that, Alex? Oh, I'm sure they would be pleased. You're abusing those kids because they're not watching sex documentaries. Exactly. Well, anyway, thank you so much for the question. And if you have questions for the Brain Trust, that's Dr. Duke and Alex, just feel free to email us. We'll take all questions. Ask Duke at fpeusa.org. That's Ask Duke at fpeusa.org for the next Brain Trust.